Good morning. Please take a moment and silence all pagers and cell phones. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Ari Grinspan for a talk on fecal microbiota transplantation. Dr. Grinspan is an associate professor of medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. He received his Bachelor of Arts from the University of Pennsylvania and received his medical degree from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, where he was inducted into the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Society. He performed his internal medicine training at New York Presbyterian Hospital, where he served as assistant chief resident. He completed his gastroenterology fellowship here at Mount Sinai, where he served as chief fellow. Dr. Grinspan pioneered the fecal microbiota transplant program to treat recurrent and refractory Clostridium difficile infection at Mount Sinai, which he has now developed into a leading referral center in the tri-state area. His research focus is on exploring the mechanism and clinical utility of fecal microbiota transplantation in Clostridium difficile infection and inflammatory bowel disease. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Ari Grinspan.
First, I'd like to thank Professor Murphy for promoting me so early in my career. I appreciate that. So I will be giving a talk about FMT. No, thank you. Fecal microbiota transplantation, which we use for C. diff. And I'll talk mostly about C. diff just because I think that it's more apt for this audience, but I'll also talk about indications or possible indications beyond C. diff. So I actually have a disclosure. I will be a site investigator for a clinical trial involving Seres Health, which I'll talk a little bit about later in the talk. FMT, fecal microbiota transplant. You can't turn on the news, you can't go on to Paris Hilton without finding something about FMT. There are multiple blogs out there, The Power of Poop, Poop Power. There's multiple YouTube videos about how you can actually do this at home. We call it the DIY or do it yourself. I do not recommend that. And I think the heyday came in December and actually recently in May when the New Yorker published an article called The Excrement Experiment, which sort of highlighted what I am trying to do here. And then actually, unbeknownst to me, I found myself in Esquire magazine in May talking about what the services that I provide. So the joke in the division is that I actually published in the most prestigious journals. So this is the outline of my talk. I'll talk briefly about the introduction to the microbiome. There's some terms that you just sort of need to be familiar with before I go along. Then I'll talk about C. diff. Then I'll talk about the use of fecal transplant for C. diff, and then use in other indications. So first, some definitions. The microbiome. What is this microbiome we keep hearing about? It is the ecological community of commensal, symbiotic, and pathogenic microorganisms that share our body space. The microbiota, or when I refer to the microbiota, I will be referring to the actual bacteria that reside in our gut. The microbiome is actually how the bacteria interact with us. And then I'll be mentioning this term dysbiosis. The dysbiosis is what I will refer to as a disruption in the gut bacteria that typically lead to disease. So in our guts, or in our bodies, there are 10 times as many bacterial cells as there are human cells. So we're actually more bacteria than we are human. If you talk to the geneticists, they'll say it's actually more staggering than that. There's 100 times as many bacterial DNA as there is human DNA. And for the first time, we're actually able to study the microbiota via culture-independent pathways. So what we used to do is we would take a swab, we'd grow it up, and whatever grew, we would decide, well, that's what's in our guts. Well, it's far more